So without much ado, I'm going to pose our first challenge to our traders. Today, we have non-farm payrolls. Of course, that's the big event of the day. The market is all over the place. Some analysts are calling for 600,000. Some are calling for 1 million. Depending where that number lands, it's going to have a very big impact on a whole bunch of assets and instruments. So my first challenge to both of our traders is the following. I want you to pick the currency, the best currency pair that you think is going to perform well in front of the event. I want you to pick the best index instrument in front of the event. And for those that you want to get a little bit more nuanced, the best currency cross, perhaps, that could kind of shelter you away from market risk. So let's start with Blake, since he is Mr. FX. And let's see what he's got up his sleeve today as far as his ideas ahead of non-farm payrolls and also his views on non-farm payrolls as we get ready for the event.
Well, Boris, thanks for having me back. And Dave, ready to go at it? Good to be in the ring with you.
All right. So what do you think? What do you think looks good right now as we're approaching the big event?
Well, there's a few things. I guess I want to start out by saying that the equity markets. You're looking at the Nasdaq, and it continues to rally here. And I'll pull up the chart if you guys aren't looking at it. We're above like some pretty big confluence of fib levels and over the 127% extension. I think.
Blake, could you do us a favor? Could you share your screen? Because we'd love to see what you're looking at.
I'm going to do that right now.
Yeah. Click that share screen button, and we'll look at the charts along with you. All right, awesome.
Okay, there we go.
We got it.
So, if you see the Nasdaq, we're ripping up to highs, and on a weak data print, if we let's say we only create 400,000 or 500,000 jobs, let's just talk headline number. The Nasdaq should continue to rally. However, I'm actually gonna bet on the U.S. jobs report. I'm gonna bet the fact that we've had two kind of underperforming jobs reports, and I think the whisper numbers are correct. I think the whisper numbers coming in around 800,000. I think, and some of them are maybe even north of that.
Right.
I think they're right.
One whisper number that's the million. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, if we create 1 million jobs, the stock market's really going to take notice. I think people are going to start thinking Jackson Hole, Powell's going to be a little bit more hawkish. We're going to talk about tapering, and maybe that moves that goalpost a little bit closer to us actually tapering, and maybe even at a faster rate than the market is expecting. So I would, if you have to hold a gun to my head and say, hey, ahead of the job report, I know you are. And I'm not that type of trader, but I would be selling NASDAQ here.
Okay. And so it's really interesting. Your basic thought pattern here is great news is bad news for equities, because 100%. that means the Fed, and especially, this is really interesting, not necessarily just for all equities, but NASDAQ in particular, because the Fed is going to be much more likely to taper sooner rather than later.
And I think it's going to hit growth. These growth stocks a little bit more aggressively.
And to make some of our viewers understand a little bit better what the macro thinking behind that is the following. NASDAQ stocks are all trading at very, very high multiples, much higher multiples than almost any historical measure. The reason for that is because money is absolutely free. There's almost no interest rate attached. And as long as money stays free, that creates that whole vertical move up on the NASDAQ. But if money starts to become even a tiny bit expensive, if the Fed just makes a hint that they're going to start raising rates sometime down the road, that puts a tremendous amount of headwind for NASDAQ, which is why Blake is basically betting that great news for the economy is going to be bad news for the NASDAQ stock market. Very interesting.
Yeah, and you got to imagine too, Boris, that in the event that we have a weak data point, this is going to break out. And if I was to trade pre-NFP, my stops would be above this trend line, which is about 14,000. Let's call it 14,650. Somewhere above here, I'd be nervous about being short.
Okay.